All stories uploaded by Epic Yarn are works of fiction submitted by various contributors and subscribers. These narratives are crafted for entertainment and storytelling purposes, with no claims of factual accuracy or real-world events. Additionally, the images accompanying each story are generated using AI technology, designed to visually enhance the storytelling experience.
Jacob.
Chapter 1: Echoes of a Perfect Life. The scent of turpentine and freshly brewed coffee usually meant Michael was in his element, a canvas blooming with vibrant colors in their sun-drenched loft. Today, however, the dominant aroma was something far more charred. Jacob Carter, what is that? Michael Smith, clad in paint-splattered jeans and a perfectly soft, worn t-shirt that clung to his athletic, rugged frame, emerged from his makeshift studio, his deep blue eyes twinkling with a mix of affection and mild alarm. At 30 years old and a solid 6 feet 0 inches, Michael moved with the confident grace of a man who knew exactly what he wanted. Usually, it involved a paintbrush or an adrenaline rush. Jacob, all 6 feet 2 inches of masculine and powerful build, stood valiantly by the stove, tongs in hand, staring down a rather sad-looking pancake. Or what was left of it. It's a tribute to our 5 years, darling. A perfectly crispy anniversary pancake. He offered his charming, confident smile, the one that usually melted Michael's painter's heart, but even Jacob's steel-blue eyes couldn't hide the slight singe to his sandy brown hair. At 35, Jacob was a seasoned entrepreneur, usually calm under pressure, but his culinary skills were, charitably speaking, underdeveloped. A tribute to the smoke detector, more like, Michael chuckled, deftly grabbing a fire extinguisher from under the sink. Good thing my solo exhibition isn't dependent on your cooking, babe. He winked, then leaned in to kiss the singed hair. Happy 5 years, you disaster in the kitchen. Jacob wrapped an arm around Michael's waist, pulling him close. 5 years. It felt like 5 minutes in a lifetime all at once. They had built this, brick by laugh-filled brick, Jacob's booming tech startup, Michael's burgeoning art career, and a shared life filled with spontaneous road trips, quiet evenings on the couch, and a mutual understanding that words often couldn't capture. Speaking of the exhibition, you're sure you're ready? It's huge, Mike. Jacob's voice held genuine admiration. He'd watched Michael pour his soul onto those canvases, seen the late nights and the moments of frustrated genius. Michael's charming smile softened. As ready as I'll ever be. The gallery wants a few final pieces, and then, it's showtime. You know, you could pose for one of them before you jet off. Just a quick sketch. Something heroic, or maybe, something utterly ridiculous for my City Boy in the Country series. He playfully nudged Jacob's strong arm. Jacob laughed, picturing himself knee-deep in mud, trying to herd chickens. Highly unlikely, love. This business trip to Manila is crucial. Big potential investor. If this goes through, it's a game-changer for the company. He sighed, though a gleam of excitement was in his eye. Long meetings, early flights. No time for art world shenanigans. Michael feigned a dramatic sigh. Fine, Mr. Big Shot CEO. Just don't forget me amongst all your important spreadsheets. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to Jacob's lips. Promise me you'll call me as soon as you land. Every minute, Jacob promised, pulling him into a tight hug. He inhaled the familiar scent of Michael's skin, a mix of paint, soap, and something uniquely Michael. Their home felt warm, alive, vibrant. A perfect life. Flights in a few hours, Jacob announced, grabbing his briefcase. Keys, wallet, phone, passport? Damn it, where's my passport? A sudden, comical scramble ensued. Michael, ever the organized one, calmly pointed to it, lying innocently on the kitchen counter, right next to the smoking pancake. Seriously, how do you run a multi-million-dollar company when you can't even find your passport? Michael teased, handing it over with a shake of his head. Jacob just grinned, pulling Michael in for one last, firm kiss. Talent, darling. Pure talent. I'll be back before you know it. Love you. "Love you too," Michael called out, watching Jacob stride out the door, briefcase in hand. The front door clicked shut, leaving Michael in the quiet loft, the faint smell of burnt breakfast, and the lingering warmth of a 5-year love story. He had no idea how dramatically that perfect story was about to change. Chapter 2: The Crash and the Kindness of Strangers. Jacob's flight to Manila had been uneventful, but his subsequent journey to the potential investor's remote estate was anything but. A sudden, torrential downpour turned the winding provincial road into a treacherous ribbon of slick asphalt. One moment, he was mentally reviewing his presentation, the next, a blinding flash of headlights, a violent swerve, and the world spun into a chaotic ballet of screeching tires and shattering glass. Then, nothing. Miles away, in the quiet, green embrace of his farm, Gabriel Santiago was attempting to coax a particularly stubborn goat back into its pen. At 30 years old, with his athletic, lean muscle and sun-kissed glow, Gabriel moved with a practiced ease, a stark contrast to Jacob's earlier kitchen antics. He paused, a strange chill creeping up his spine, despite the mild evening air. Just a draft, he thought, shaking off the uneasy feeling, but the goat seemed to sense it too, bleating mournfully towards the distant main road. It wasn't long after, a faint, metallic clang echoing through the valley, that Gabriel, ever observant, noticed an unusual flicker of light on the horizon. Curiosity, a rare indulgence for the introspective farmer, nudged him to investigate. What he found was a crumpled metal husk of a car, and nearby, a figure slumped against a tree, bleeding and still. Without a moment's hesitation, the quiet thinker turned decisive doer. He called for help, then, with surprising strength, carefully moved Jacob to a safer spot, his architectural eye already assessing the structural damage of the vehicle and the human form. At the small, local hospital, the air buzzed with rural efficiency. Jacob awoke to the sterile scent of disinfectant and a blinding white ceiling. He tried to move, but a dull ache permeated his entire body. A man with piercing green eyes and tousled dark blonde hair was leaning over him, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Jacob's internal panic. "Welcome back to the land of the living, mister," Gabriel said, a slight, awkward pause before the mister as he realized he didn't know the man's name. "You took quite a tumble." Jacob blinked, his mind a void. "Mister," he croaked, his voice raspy. "Am I the new patient? Is this a hospital? Did I miss my flight to the moon?" He frowned, genuinely confused. Gabriel stifled a chuckle, realizing the gravity of the situation was compounded by a touch of amnesia-induced whimsy. "It's a hospital, yes. And no moon flight. You were in an accident," Gabriel explained gently. "They said you have some memory loss. Do you remember your name?" Jacob stared blankly. He tried to pull a name from the swirling fog, but nothing. I don't know." He then looked at Gabriel with a bewildered expression. "Are you my doctor? Or, my long-lost brother who finally showed up after all these years?" Gabriel, who was an only child, just blinked. "Or perhaps my extremely handsome taxi driver who rescued me from an alien abduction?" Gabriel's lips twitched. "Neither. I'm Gabriel. I found you." He decided then and there to call him Jake for simplicity, a new, untainted name for a man with a blank slate. "The doctors say you'll need a quiet place to recover. My farm is nearby." Meanwhile, back in the city, Michael Smith was spiraling. Jacob was supposed to have called. He tried Jacob's phone a dozen times, each unanswered ring sending a fresh spike of anxiety through him. He called Jacob's office, his assistant, even the airline, getting nothing but corporate platitudes. "He's probably just in a no-service zone," Mike, his best friend, Liam, tried to reassure him over the phone, but Michael was already pacing a groove into his studio floor. "No, Liam, you don't understand. Jacob always calls. He'd call from a payphone in a jungle if he had to. Something's wrong. I can feel it." Michael's gut clenched. He spent hours on the phone, hitting bureaucratic brick walls, explaining Jacob's description with increasing desperation, only to be met with polite, unhelpful apologies. He even tried calling every hospital in Manila, picturing Jacob in some grand, sprawling medical facility, only to be told no one fitting his description had been admitted. His frantic efforts, though driven by fear, often led to comically frustrating miscommunications, like trying to explain chiseled jawline to a confused hospital administrator who barely spoke English. The search for Jacob, the love of his life, was proving to be a bureaucratic nightmare, each dead end chipping away at his hope. Chapter 3: A New Beginning in the Countryside. Life on Gabriel's farm was an experience. For Jacob, or rather, Jake, as Gabriel had affectionately dubbed him, it was a crash course in rural living. His tailored suits were replaced by Gabriel's spare work clothes, flannel shirts that swallowed his broad shoulders and jeans that had seen more mud than a city park. The silence, after the constant hum of Manila's ambition, was deafening, occasionally punctuated by the indignant bleating of a goat or the surprisingly loud crunch of Gabriel chewing on an apple. "All right, Jake, time to meet the ladies," Gabriel announced one crisp morning, gesturing towards a pen of rather large, very curious-looking dairy cows. Gabriel, despite his calm demeanor, was often caught trying to suppress a smirk as Jake navigated the unfamiliar terrain. He patiently showed Jake how to approach them, how to handle the milking equipment. Jake, the seasoned entrepreneur who could negotiate multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, looked utterly bewildered. "The ladies? You mean, these bovine giants? And where exactly do I plug in the udders?" He stared at the mechanical milker as if it were a complex alien device. Gabriel just chuckled, a rare, low sound. "No plugs, Jake. Just gravity and a little technique." The ensuing scene involved a surprisingly agile cow, a startled Jake, and a splash of milk that decorated his new flannel shirt like modern art. "Okay," Gabriel managed, wiping tears of suppressed laughter from his eyes, "maybe we start with egg collection." Days bled into weeks. Jake, initially clumsy, slowly began to find a rhythm. He learned to feed the chickens without being pecked, to gather eggs without dropping them, and even, eventually, to milk a cow, albeit with a lingering sense of apprehension. He still couldn't recall a single thing about his past, but the simple, honest work on the farm, coupled with Gabriel's unwavering patience, began to soothe a restless core he didn't even know he had. Gabriel, with his quiet strength and unexpected wit, became Jake's anchor in this bewildering new reality. They spent evenings on the porch, watching the stars, Gabriel sharing stories of the constellations, and Jake, now Jake, listening, feeling a connection he couldn't name, but deeply cherished. Gabriel, too, found himself increasingly drawn to the charming, vulnerable man he'd rescued, a feeling that went beyond mere compassion. A month after the accident, the initial panic for Jacob had somewhat subsided, replaced by a deep, aching worry for Michael. He'd exhausted every official channel, every phone number, every contact. His studio, usually a riot of color and energy, now felt cold and empty, filled with unfinished canvases and the ghost of Jacob's presence. "Look, Mike, I've put out feelers everywhere," Liam said, over another increasingly tense coffee meeting. "Missing persons reports, the works. He's just gone. The police think he might have just done a runner." Michael slammed his mug down, the ceramic clinking loudly. "A runner? Jacob? Liam, we just celebrated 5 years. He wouldn't just vanish. He can't." Michael ran a hand through his short, dark brown hair, his deep blue eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He knew Jacob. He knew their love. The idea was absurd, hurtful. His own artistic process was stalled, the vibrancy of his work replaced by muted grays and anxious strokes. He felt the absence of Jacob like a phantom limb. He resolved then to hire a private investigator, a slightly desperate move, but one he felt was absolutely necessary. He was Michael Smith, and he wasn't about to give up on the love of his life, even if the universe seemed determined to hide him. His efforts to explain Jacob's commanding presence to the gruff, no-nonsense investigator, only to have the man grunt back just tall and handsome, "Got it," provided a brief, exasperated moment of comic relief in Michael's otherwise agonizing search. Chapter 4: Bonds Forged in Silence. A full month had spun past on Gabriel's farm, and Jake was, surprisingly, thriving. He could now confidently collect eggs without a single crack, and only occasionally muttered about the indignity of chicken poop on his, Gabriel's, borrowed boots. His morning routine now involved a ritualistic, if still slightly awkward, greeting to the cows, who seemed to have accepted him as a quirky, but harmless, addition to the farm. The humor continued, subtly woven into the fabric of their days. One afternoon, Jake, attempting to fix a leaky faucet in the barn, managed to flood a significant portion of the floor, creating a comical slip-and-slide for the resident ducks. Gabriel, ever the calm problem solver, merely watched, a wry smile playing on his lips, before handing Jake a mop and a helpful diagram of basic plumbing. You know, for an entrepreneur who deals with complex algorithms, you're surprisingly analog with a wrench, Gabriel had quipped, earning a playful splash of water from Jake. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. They talked about everything and nothing, the quiet beauty of the countryside, the constellations blazing overhead on clear nights, the frustrating nuances of crop rotation. Gabriel, with his background in architecture, spoke passionately about restoring old buildings, his piercing green eyes lighting up as he described the stories hidden within crumbling stone. Jake, in turn, found himself listening intently, a sense of calm washing over him that had been entirely absent from his fragmented existence. He still had no past, but with Gabriel, he felt a profound sense of present. Gabriel, for his part, found himself utterly captivated by Jake. The initial compassion had blossomed into something far more potent. Jake's genuine curiosity, his unexpected vulnerability despite his former commanding presence, and his endearing clumsiness around farm life were utterly charming. Gabriel, the introspective farmer, usually reserved, found himself opening up, sharing dreams and fears he hadn't articulated to anyone before. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day baling hay, a task Jake approached with the ferocity of a seasoned athlete, only to collapse in a heap of amused exhaustion moments later, they sat on the porch, a comfortable silence stretching between them. The cicadas hummed a lullaby, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. You know, Jake began, breaking the quiet, I tried to bake you something earlier. As a thank you. For, you know, everything. He gestured vaguely towards the kitchen. Gabriel, who had been enjoying the peace, braced himself. Oh, he asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Yes. A pie. Apple. From the orchard. Jake paused, rubbing the back of his neck. It decided to become one with the oven. Quite literally. I think it achieved sentience and attempted to escape. He let out a sheepish laugh. Gabriel couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, warm sound that filled the night. Well, the thought counts, Jake. Truly. He reached out, his hand gently covering Jake's. The touch was electric, a spark in the quiet darkness. Jake's eyes, those steel blue eyes that still held a hint of bewilderment, met Gabriel's. The air suddenly thrummed with an unspoken tension, a longing that had been steadily building between them. The stars seemed to grow brighter, the cicadas louder, as the world around them faded into a soft blur. Gabriel leaned closer, his calm facade momentarily cracking, revealing a raw vulnerability. Jake, utterly lost in the moment, responded without hesitation. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deepening with a quiet intensity. It was a kiss born of shared solitude, of unspoken needs, of a desperate, beautiful connection forged in a time of forgetting. That night, under the vast, stardusted sky, the comfortable companionship between Jake and Gabriel transcended friendship. Their intimacy was a quiet unfolding, a tender exploration of connection in a world Jake couldn't yet remember, but in which he felt profoundly, wonderfully, present. Gabriel, the quiet thinker, surprisingly bold in his affections, felt a profound sense of rightness, a joy tinged with the knowledge that this beautiful, temporary bubble could burst at any moment. Chapter 5, Whispers of the Past. Jacob's physical recovery was progressing beautifully. He could now heft a bale of hay with only a minimal groan and had developed a surprisingly effective, if slightly theatrical, technique for shooing away chickens that involved a lot of arm waving and loud shoo-shoo-shoo noises. Gabriel found it endlessly amusing, often watching from a distance, a soft smile playing on his lips. Despite the growing comfort and affection between them, Jacob's mind remained a perplexing blank slate. He still couldn't recall anything before the accident. The doctors had suggested gentle reminders, familiar objects, but nothing seemed to stick. One afternoon, while helping Gabriel sort through a dusty box of old tools in the barn, Jacob unearthed a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It was smooth beneath his fingers, worn with age, and surprisingly warm. The moment his fingers closed around it, a strange sensation prickled at the back of his neck. A fleeting, disorienting image flashed behind his eyes, a vibrant splash of cobalt blue, the faint, sweet scent of oil paint, and a warm, wide smile that seemed to fill the entire frame. He heard a soft, melodic laugh, and then, a name, indistinct but persistent, fluttering on the tip of his tongue like a butterfly teasing a flower. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to grasp it, but it slipped away like smoke. "Everything all right, Jake?" Gabriel's calm voice cut through the haze. He saw the flicker of distress on Jacob's face. Jacob opened his eyes, shaking his head slightly. "Yeah, fine. Just this bird." It felt familiar. Like I'd seen it before. Or dreamt it. He shrugged, dismissing it with a nervous laugh. Probably just my brain trying to make up for lost time. Or maybe I just really like birds now. He tossed the wooden bird casually back into the box, convinced it was just a phantom memory, a trick of a confused mind. Gabriel, however, noticed the slight tremble in Jake's hand and the distant look in his steel blue eyes. Meanwhile, in the bustling city, Michael Smith was on the verge of exhaustion, but his resolve remained unbroken. The private investigator he'd hired, a grizzled man named Frank who seemed to communicate exclusively through grunts and eye rolls, was proving more expensive than effective. "Another dead end, Mr. Smith," Frank grunted over the phone. "Check that rural inn. No one fitting the description. Might as well pack it in." "No!" Michael snapped, regretting his tone immediately. "Frank, please. Don't give up. He's out there. I know it." Michael, the usually composed painter, was a bundle of raw nerves. He'd even started talking to his canvases, confiding his worries to unfinished portraits of Jacob, who seemed to stare back at him with knowing, painted eyes. His attempts to get helpful tips from self-help books on how to deal with missing loved ones often led to him scoffing loudly at the platitudes, much to the amusement of his bewildered cat. One evening, while Michael was angrily scrolling through old news articles about car accidents, his phone buzzed. It was Frank, but this time, his voice held a hint of something other than resignation. "Got a vague tip, Mr. Smith. A small accident, a month ago, near some remote farmland. Local farmer pulled someone out. Sounded like your guy. Didn't go to a big hospital, small clinic. Name's Gabriel Santiago. Runs a farm out that way." Michael's heart leaped into his throat. A farmer. A month ago. Memory loss. It all clicked into place with terrifying, exhilarating clarity. He grabbed his car keys, his mind a whirlwind of fear and a desperate, surging hope. He didn't even bother to thank Frank, simply hung up and ran for the door. His cat, startled by the sudden commotion, let out a dramatic meow, as if to say, finally. Some action. Michael was on his way, driving towards the vague rural area, fueled by a surge of hope and anxiety, utterly oblivious to the quiet drama that had been unfolding on Gabriel's farm. Chapter 6, A Distant Echo, a Familiar Face. Michael's drive to the remote rural area was a blur of frantic hope and white-knuckled anxiety. He navigated the winding, unfamiliar roads with a combination of sheer willpower and a GPS system that seemed to have a vendetta against him, repeatedly directing him down muddy, unpaved paths that were clearly meant for tractors, not his sleek city car. More than once, he found himself pulling over to angrily consult the map, muttering about digital incompetence and agrarian conspiracy theories. His usual painter's calm was replaced by a twitchy urgency, his artist's eye now hyper-focused on every passing vehicle and every distant farmhouse. Frank's tip, vague as it was, pointed towards a small cluster of hamlets known for their organic produce and artisanal crafts. Michael pulled into a surprisingly bustling open-air market, the scent of fresh-baked bread and earthy vegetables a stark contrast to the city's exhaust fumes and coffee. He felt absurdly out of place, a designer sneaker in a sea of work boots, but his eyes scanned the crowd with a laser-like intensity. Amidst a flurry of brightly colored stalls and the chatter of local farmers, his gaze snagged. Across the throng, by a stand piled high with vibrant, fresh produce, stood a man. Tall. Broad shoulders. Sandy brown hair. A profile that sent a jolt through Michael's entire being, a feeling of recognition so profound it was physical. It was Jacob. Jacob, who was currently attempting to haggle for a particularly plump squash, much to Gabriel's quiet amusement, suddenly felt an inexplicable prickle on the back of his neck. He paused, the squash momentarily forgotten, and turned his head slowly. His gaze drifted across the crowded market, past laughing children and busy vendors, until it landed on a man standing near a display of handcrafted pottery. The man had deep blue eyes and short, dark brown hair styled with a slight wave. He possessed an athletic, rugged frame and a charming smile that, even from a distance, seemed to radiate warmth. For Jacob, the sight sent a powerful, disorienting wave through him, not a memory, not yet, but an overwhelming sense of familiarity. An ache bloomed in his chest, a yearning for something he couldn't name. He felt a powerful, undeniable pull, a feeling of both recognition and profound, devastating loss. It was the face from his fleeting dreams, the face that evoked an inexplicable sadness and longing. Michael, meanwhile, was frozen. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of relief and terror. It's him. It's really him. Tears stung his eyes, blurring his vision, but he couldn't look away. He saw Gabriel standing beside Jacob, saw the easy camaraderie between them, and a fresh wave of confusion and dread washed over him. Why was Jacob with this farmer? Why wasn't he looking for Michael? Just as Michael took a shaky step forward, a sudden surge of marketgoers, jostling and laughing, pushed between them, momentarily obscuring Jacob from his view. When the crowd parted, Jacob was turned away, laughing at something Gabriel said, and then they moved, disappearing into the throng. Jacob, shaken by the inexplicable feeling, turned back to Gabriel. Did you feel that?" he asked, rubbing his chest. "Like a premonition? Or indigestion?" "I just felt a weird pull towards that pottery stall." He looked around once more, hoping to catch another glimpse of the beautiful stranger, but he was gone. He shrugged, dismissing it as another strange quirk of his amnesiac brain. Gabriel, however, had noticed the sudden shift in Jake's demeanor, the way his steel-blue eyes had suddenly sharpened with an unreadable emotion. He'd also caught a fleeting glimpse of a distressed-looking man near the pottery. Gabriel felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The quiet bubble of their life on the farm, so carefully cultivated, felt suddenly fragile, like it might burst. Michael, left standing alone, breathless and overwhelmed, realized he'd found Jacob. But the discovery was far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. He now knew where Jacob was, but the truth of who Jacob was, and who he was with, remained a terrifying, heartbreaking mystery. He had to know more. Chapter 7: The Lingering Scent of Home. The fleeting encounter at the market left Jacob deeply unsettled. The face, the inexplicable pull, the ache in his chest, it all gnawed at him, a persistent, unsettling itch his amnesiac brain couldn't scratch. The quiet comfort of Gabriel's farm, once a serene sanctuary, now felt tinged with an unfamiliar tension. His dreams, once a merciful blank, became vivid, fragmented, and utterly bizarre. One night, he dreamed of a vibrant city, not Manila, but another metropolis teeming with life. He saw himself, impossibly, painting a giant mural of a grumpy pigeon, with Michael, the stranger from the market, dressed as a superhero, wielding a giant paintbrush like a sword, battling a horde of tiny, angry canvases. The smell of turpentine was overpowering, and then, distinctly, a voice, clearer than before, calling his name, not Jake, but Jacob, long and drawn out, yet still elusive, like a melody he almost knew. He woke with a jolt, covered in sweat, the absurd imagery and the haunting voice lingering in his mind. "You look like you've wrestled a barn full of phantom pigs," Gabriel observed one morning, handing Jacob a mug of herbal tea. He'd noticed Jake's increasing restlessness, the way his steel blue eyes seemed to gaze beyond the fields, into some unseen distance. Gabriel felt a quiet dread pooling in his stomach. He knew, instinctively, that the man in the market was a key to Jake's past, and that past was a threat to their fragile present. "Worse," Jacob muttered, running a hand through his sandy brown hair. "I dreamt I was a sidekick to a superhero painter fighting sentient canvases. And there was this guy, from the market. The one with the blue eyes. He was everywhere." He paused, looking genuinely bewildered. "And I think he was singing a terrible karaoke version of Bohemian Rhapsody in the background." Gabriel managed a strained smile. "Interesting. Perhaps your subconscious is trying to tell you to take up painting. Or avoid karaoke." He tried to keep his voice light, but the knot of fear in his stomach tightened. The mention of the man from the market confirmed his worst fears. Despite his internal turmoil, Gabriel remained steadfastly supportive, offering solace even as his own heart ached. He listened patiently to Jacob's increasingly surreal dream descriptions, offering practical, albeit humorously detached, interpretations. "Perhaps the giant canvases represent your unresolved fear of large-scale art projects, Jake." Meanwhile, back in the city, Michael Smith was a man possessed. After the market encounter, he knew Jacob was alive. That was all that mattered. He called Frank, the private investigator, every hour, demanding more details about Gabriel Santiago. He'd found Gabriel's farm online, a quaint, rustic website filled with pictures of happy livestock and serene landscapes. Michael felt a bitter irony. His Jacob, the man who thrived on high-stakes deals and luxury hotels, was now living a bucolic life with a farmer. "So, is this Gabriel guy his long-lost twin?" Liam joked over the phone, trying to lighten Michael's mood. "No, Liam. He's just a farmer," Michael retorted, frustrated. "But he rescued Jacob. He's been caring for him." He then paced his studio, surrounded by the unfinished canvases that now felt like monuments to his anxiety. He tried to paint, to channel his turmoil, but every stroke felt hollow. His latest attempt at a portrait of Jacob, instead of capturing his usual commanding presence, ended up looking like a slightly worried garden gnome. He glared at it, then sighed. Michael's focus narrowed. He began digging deeper into Gabriel's online presence, finding articles about his work in architectural preservation, even a few local newspaper pieces about his farm's sustainable practices. He learned Gabriel's full name, Gabriel Santiago. The more he learned, the more his confusion grew. Who was this man, and what was his relationship with Jacob? He knew he couldn't stay away any longer. He had to go back to the farm. This time, he wouldn't let Jacob out of his sight. Chapter 8, The Confrontation. Michael's car churned up dust as he finally, thankfully, made it down the long, gravel driveway leading to Gabriel Santiago's farm. His heart was a frantic drum solo in his chest, a mixture of exhilaration and raw dread. He killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening, and stared at the rustic farmhouse. This was it. Jacob was in there. His Jacob. He took a shaky breath, then pushed open the car door, his gaze fixed on the front porch. And there he was. Jacob, in a faded flannel shirt, looking leaner, sun-kissed, and utterly alien. He was watering a row of potted herbs, a serene expression on his face. This wasn't the driven entrepreneur he knew, this was Jacob. Michael's voice, usually a confident baritone, came out as a strangled cry. He started running, tripping over an unseen garden hose, nearly face-planting into a patch of sunflowers. He recovered with a clumsy stumble, then resumed his charge. Jacob, startled by the sudden commotion and the bizarrely familiar, albeit flailing, figure, dropped the watering can. It clattered to the wooden porch, spilling water everywhere. He stared, his steel blue eyes wide with a mix of confusion and that persistent, unsettling sense of déjà vu. The man was breathless, his deep blue eyes shining with an intensity that pulled at something deep inside Jacob. He was the stranger from the market. The man from his absurd, karaoke-filled dreams. Are you okay? Jacob managed, instinctively offering a hand, like he would to a bewildered tourist lost on the farm. Did you, get lost? Looking for organic goat cheese? Michael skidded to a halt just inches from Jacob, his chest heaving. Jacob! It's me! Michael! He reached out, his hands trembling, wanting to touch, to confirm. He saw the bewildered confusion in Jacob's eyes, and his heart shattered all over again. Don't you remember me? Just then, Gabriel emerged from the house, drawn by the commotion. He saw Michael, the frantic look on his face, and then he saw Jake's utterly blank expression. A cold dread settled over him. This was the moment. Jake, who is this? Gabriel's voice was calm, but there was a protective edge to it. Jacob turned to Gabriel, then back to Michael. He says his name is Michael. And that he knows me. But I don't know him. He looked utterly lost, a poignant mix of fear and desperate longing. Are you sure you have the right form? I'm Jake. I live here. With Gabriel. Michael's jaw dropped. Jake? What do you mean, Jake? Your name is Jacob Carter. We've been together for 5 years. I'm Michael, you're Michael. Your partner. He suddenly pulled out his phone, thrusting it into Jacob's bewildered face. Look at these pictures. Our anniversary dinner. That ridiculous vacation to Santorini. Your art studio, my paintings. Our life. Jacob took the phone, his gaze falling on an image of himself, laughing, his arm around the man with the deep blue eyes. The setting was familiar, their loft. And there was a painting in the background, a large, vibrant abstract. The scent of turpentine, a phantom smell from his dreams, seemed to grow stronger. He scrolled through, each image a jarring, yet oddly compelling, piece of a puzzle he couldn't put together. He saw himself, younger, more formal, less earthy. He saw a man who looked at him with an undeniable love, a man whose smile felt so profoundly right. A wave of dizziness washed over Jacob. The images, Michael's desperate voice, the tangible proof of a life he couldn't recall, all collided with the quiet, familiar reality of Gabriel's farm. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to fight the overwhelming confusion. The name, Michael, now felt like a buzzing behind his ears, a constant, insistent echo. He saw him clearly now, the face from his dreams, the beautiful stranger, and the name, Michael, was trying desperately to break through the fog. But it was just a name, without the context, without the memories. What's happening? Jacob whispered, clutching his head, a searing headache beginning to throb behind his temples. I know you. I feel like I know you. But who are you? Michael, tears streaming down his face, couldn't hold back. I'm the man who loves you, Jacob. The man you've forgotten. He stepped forward, his hand reaching out, ready to pull Jacob into an embrace, to somehow force the memories back. Gabriel, witnessing the agonizing struggle on Jake's face, stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Michael's arm. Please. He's overwhelmed. Give him some space. His piercing green eyes met Michael's, a silent plea for understanding, and a clear, unspoken acknowledgement of the deep affection he held for Jake. The air crackled with raw emotion, a tense standoff between past and present, love found and love forgotten. Chapter 9, The Unraveling Truth. The air on Gabriel's porch remained thick with unspoken words and raw emotion, like a thunderstorm brewing over the quiet fields. Michael, trembling but determined, pulled his hand back at Gabriel's request, but his deep blue eyes never left Jacob's tormented face. Gabriel, for his part, stood a respectful distance, his piercing green eyes fixed on Jake, a silent battle waging within him. Jacob, meanwhile, was experiencing a mental fireworks display of the most painful kind. Michael's insistent voice, the flood of images on the phone, each a tiny, perfect shard of a life he couldn't grasp, forced something to crack. A memory, sharp and unbidden, flashed through his mind. Michael, mid-paint stroke, accidentally getting a streak of bright orange in his hair, then laughing so hard he nearly toppled off his stool. It was so vivid, so Michael, that a choked sound escaped Jacob's throat. The orange, Jacob rasped, pointing a shaky finger at Michael, who looked utterly bewildered. The orange in your hair. And that ridiculously oversized painting smock you insisted on wearing for artistic flair. He then suddenly gasped, a bitter memory surfacing. And you hate Santorini. You said the white buildings made you feel like you were trapped in a giant yogurt commercial. Michael's face crumpled, a sob escaping him. You remember. Jacob stared at him, a dawning horror and wonder in his steel blue eyes. The memories were coming in a rush now, disjointed but undeniable. Their first date, Jacob trying to impress Michael with his business acumen, only to accidentally spill wine on a very expensive tablecloth. Michael's contagious laugh, echoing through their loft as they danced to awful 80s pop. The arguments, the reconciliations, the quiet comfort of intertwined legs on the sofa. His Michael. His life. The realization hit Jacob like a physical blow, simultaneously exhilarating and devastating. He remembered the love, the deep, abiding connection, the 5 years. And then, with an equally sickening lurch, he remembered the month. The month with Gabriel. The quiet intimacy. The shared laughter. The intimate night. The sheer, terrifying weight of what he had done, what he had forgotten, descended upon him. He looked from Michael, whose face was a mask of hope and pain, to Gabriel, who stood silently, his own face unreadable, but his shoulders held with a heartbreaking tension. The truth was unraveling, and it was a tangled, messy knot. Michael, Jacob whispered, the name finally feeling right on his tongue, weighty with meaning. Oh God, Michael. I remember. He took a hesitant step forward, reaching out a hand, then dropping it, unsure. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. His voice cracked, tears finally spilling down his face. Michael, despite his tears, surged forward, wrapping Jacob in a fierce, desperate embrace. He clung to him, burying his face in Jacob's shoulder, sobbing with a mixture of relief and profound sorrow. You're back. My Jacob is back. In the background, Gabriel watched, his heart aching with a silent, profound grief. He saw the way Jacob's body melted into Michael's embrace, the raw emotion in their reunion. He knew, intellectually, that this was inevitable. Jake was Jacob, and Jacob had a life, a love. But the quiet affection they had built, the genuine connection, now felt like a fragile, beautiful lie. He had saved Jacob, he had loved him, but he had also, unknowingly, fallen in love with a man who belonged to another. The sting of betrayal, not of Jacob's making but of circumstance, was a bitter pill. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping over the fields, the farm that had been their shared sanctuary, now the backdrop to a heartbreaking revelation. Jacob, still clinging to Michael, glanced over Michael's shoulder at Gabriel. Their eyes met. Gabriel offered a small, sad nod, a silent acknowledgement of the truth. There was no anger in Gabriel's gaze, only a profound, quiet understanding, and a devastating resignation. The weight of his accidental betrayal settled heavily on Jacob's shoulders, even as the joy of remembering Michael began to surge. Chapter 10, Choosing a Future. The following days on the farm were a masterclass in emotional complexity. Jacob, now fully Jacob again, was a whirlwind of remembered affections and devastating guilt. He spent hours with Michael, piecing together their 5 years, reliving inside jokes, and rediscovering the effortless rhythm of their connection. Michael, for his part, was a mixture of overflowing relief and simmering hurt. He saw the genuine remorse in Jacob's steel blue eyes, but the image of Jacob with Gabriel, the intimate night, was a ghost that lingered. Do you remember, Michael started one evening, watching Jacob expertly peel an apple, a skill he'd apparently learned from Gabriel, that time we tried to assemble that IKEA bookshelf? You swore you were an engineering genius and we ended up with a coffee table. He tried to laugh, but it caught in his throat. Jacob winced. Ah, yes. The great IKEA disaster. I believe it ended with you threatening to paint IKEA was here on my forehead. He smiled faintly, the memory sharp and clear. It's all coming back, Mike. Everything. And that's why I need to talk to Gabriel. Later that afternoon, Jacob found Gabriel by the old oak tree, sketching. Gabriel, ever the stoic, looked up, his piercing green eyes calm, but with an underlying current of pain. Gabriel, Jacob began, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. He gestured helplessly. You saved me. You cared for me. You were there when I had nothing. And I blurred so many lines. I am so incredibly sorry. Gabriel closed his sketchpad. You were Jake, he said quietly, his voice devoid of accusation. You didn't know. You couldn't. I did. I knew you didn't remember your life. I just hoped that Jake could be enough. He sighed, running a hand through his tousled dark blonde hair. It was a beautiful month, Jacob. For what it was. He offered a small, sad smile, a testament to his character. It was, Jacob agreed, his voice hoarse. And I'll never forget it. Or you. But my life, my love, it's with Michael. He took a hesitant step forward. Can we still be friends, Gabriel? I owe you everything. Gabriel looked at him, then at the distant fields. Give it time, Jacob. For all of us. But yes. I'd like that. The process of rebuilding for Jacob and Michael was both tender and comically awkward. They tried a re-first date at a fancy city restaurant. Jacob, now fully Jacob, inadvertently tried to haggle with the waiter over the price of a water bottle, a habit he'd picked up from the market, much to Michael's mortification. Michael then accidentally spilled a glass of red wine on Jacob's pristine white shirt, a clumsy echo of their real first date. They burst into laughter, the tension breaking, realizing that even with the memory gaps, their chaotic, loving dynamic was still very much alive. Some things never change, do they? Michael chuckled, dabbing at the stain. Apparently not, Jacob grinned, pulling Michael's face close for a kiss. Thank God for that. The true test came a few weeks later. Jacob and Michael, hand in hand, arrived at Gabriel's farm. Michael had been hesitant, but Jacob insisted. Gabriel met them with a shy, almost imperceptible smile. The dinner was initially strained, punctuated by polite, overly formal conversation about crop yields and art supplies. Michael kept accidentally calling Gabriel Gary, and Jacob instinctively reached for a phantom watering can when Gabriel mentioned the garden. But as the evening wore on, the genuine affection in the room began to thaw the ice. Gabriel, surprisingly, made a wry joke about Jacob's inability to tell a goat from a sheep. Michael, laughing, chimed in with a story about Jacob's ill-fated attempt at home repairs. By the end of the night, amidst the shared laughter, an olive branch of friendship had been extended, imperfect but sincere. Jacob and Michael returned to their loft, their home. The canvases in Michael's studio were once again vibrant, filled with renewed passion. Jacob's business was thriving, propelled by a newfound perspective. They had navigated amnesia, a love triangle, and the messy, hilarious, beautiful reality of a second chance. Hand in hand, they stood on their balcony, looking out at the glittering city lights. Their future was both familiar and new, a testament to the enduring power of love that could withstand forgetting, and forgive unintended betrayals. They had faced the past, embraced the present, and together, they were ready for whatever the future held.